Hello and welcome back to another video about the prophets. This time I will be talking about the prophet Jeremiah. Now, kind of the key moment within Jeremiah's time as a prophet was the fall of Jerusalem, but he was active during the reigns of three different kings of Israel: King Josiah, King Joachim, and King Zedekiah. During the reign of King Josiah, this is when he first became active, and he worked against he fought against the problem of idolatry, which was also there was also a separate reform movement going on that was reforming the religious environment. So independently of each other, two different forces working against idolatry. And then during the reign of King Joachim, this is the time when Assyria had fallen and Egypt and Babylon were entering into conflict. And King Joachim was made the king by Egypt because during the time of the Assyrian Empire, Egypt was their ally and they came to power along the Mediterranean coast. So there was this kind of back and forth, but the Israelites wanted to ally with Egypt and the others wanted to ally with Babylon. And Jeremiah actually advises them to submit to Babylon during this time because Babylon was on the campaign and heading towards Jerusalem. Now it's interesting because Babylon actually abandons the campaign before conquering Jerusalem, so it looked like Jeremiah was a false prophet. However, during the reign of King Zedekiah, Babylon comes back and conquers Jerusalem, and Jerusalem falls. And this is when Israel learns that God's protection is not unconditional. Their false sense of security is shattered, and they're sent into exile. And Jeremiah continues his prophetic activity during this time period. And during this time period, he announces a better future. He begins the promises of salvation. That they had fallen because the king didn't trust in God. But God's still not going to abandon them, and he will save them. Some of the theological themes present in this is that God is the God of Israel and of the other nations, that God has a plan for Israel that's happened throughout history and is continuing to happen even in the exile. And then he begins to speak of a new covenant that eventually comes to pass in the person of Jesus. So with that, let us turn to the text, Jeremiah chapter 30. The first part is verses 5 through 7. So thus says the Lord, we have heard a cry of panic, of terror, and no peace. So we heard, this we involves the reader. It involves even us today, extending through time and space. Hearing, and then later sight will also come into the picture, but hearing comes first. And what does Jeremiah hear? A cry of panic, of terror, and no peace. So this is something terrible. Notice that it's a triple repetition of something bad. Cry of panic, and of terror, and of no peace. So this is something that's just absolutely terrible is coming. There's no clue what it is, but it's something really, really bad. And then, so that's what they hear, and then what they see is every man like a woman in labor. And this word man, first of all, this indicates kind of two things. The first is that this terrible thing it's unstoppable. Everyone is powerless to stop it, and it's just an extraordinarily terrible event that's gonna happen. There's going to be suffering, and they're not going to be able. They're going to be powerless against it. But it's also miraculous because men don't give birth. Let me just check something really quick. So this miraculous aspect to it indicates that the speaker needs time to reflect on what this means because it's just so incredible. And then this term that's translated man is a little bit closer to a warrior. So this is not just any man, but a hero, someone powerful. So it further emphasizes just how terrible this is going to be. That this warrior, this hero, as strong as he is going to be powerless to prevent this. But notice in verse 7 that this is described as two different things, as a great day and as a time of distress. So it's positive. I mean, it's negative, time of distress, but it's also positive. This great day, this magnificent day is this phrase is connected to what's called the Day of the Lord, which appears in Isaiah as a term for the end of the monarchy, Israel's defeat, but also a day of fruitfulness, a day of salvation. So even now, in the midst of this terrible panic, this time of distress, there's still hope for the salvation. And in fact, because of that, it's still a great day, because there is still this hope. And then in verses 8 and 9, it details what this salvation will look like. And there's kind of two components to this. There's the immediate effect of salvation and liberation from Babylon, but also a more long-lasting effect of deliverance from every form of slavery, including the slavery to sin, which is what we see being fulfilled in Jesus at the with his passion, death, and resurrection, the breaking of our bonds to sin. And verses 10 through 11a, so the first part of 11, Israel gets their task, fear not. So in the first section, there's this time of great fear, of great panic, and yet Israel is instructed to fear not, to leave their fear behind. Why do they need to leave their fear behind? For I am with you, says the Lord. The Lord will be with them. He will be in their midst to protect them and to walk with them. So there's no need for fear. Salvation is coming. So with all this talk of salvation, verse 11b, the second half of 11, is a little bit interesting in that there will still be a chastisement. I will chastise you in just measure, and I will by no means leave you unpunished. So there's salvation's coming, but in justice, there needs to be some sort of chastisement, some sort of punishment. But that punishment isn't the final word. The final word is, of course, salvation. So with that is the last prophet. I hope you learned something from these videos, and I hope they were interesting. And I hope that you've had a great summer. I hope we got to meet at some point in person. But with that, I will say goodbye.